Hello, my name is Bruce Krager. I'm the son of Donald and Rachel Krager, and the brother of Charles Krager and Dorothy Krager Davis. I'm in the process of attempting to preserve some 8mm movie film shot by my father and brother during the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. I was born in July of 1936 in Washington, Indiana. Most of these pictures are shot in and around Washington. My sister Dorothy is 9 years older, my brother Charles is 12 years older than myself. Dad bought the movie camera for the Christmas of 1939. In the earliest pictures I would have been about 3.5 or 4 years old. Dorothy would have been about 12 or 13, Charles about 15 or 16, Mother about 39 or 40, and Dad about 46 or 47. At this time, in the year 2001, the film has started to deteriorate, and I'm afraid that it may become unwatchable if something isn't done. 2 reels of the film have already deteriorated to the point that they cannot be shown. I've had some of the film transferred into the digital domain. I am in hopes, as new technologies are developed, future generations will continue to put these pictures on new and a more stable media. I feel that getting them into the digital domain can keep them from looking any worse than they do at this point. As new technologies are developed, some future person may be able to make them look better, but at least they won't look any worse than they do today. The other problem I'm facing is I'm about the only person left who knows who the people in the pictures are. I'm 65 years old and expect these pictures to outlive me. I may have some of the names and facts wrong, but I am putting down my best guess. Grab some popcorn, sit back, and see what my family looked like in the mid-20th century. The pictures start before World War II, go through that war, the Korean War, and end up near the Vietnam War. The U.S. presidents were Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Harry S. Truman, Dwight David Eisenhower, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, Lyndon Baines Johnson, and Richard Milhous Nixon. Man went into space near the end of this period. At the beginning of these pictures, there were no computers, transistor radios, television sets, or jet airplanes. Enjoy.
This film was shot in about 1948. Grandfather would have been 90 years old in June of 1948. I assume that this is his 90th birthday. The pictures are taken in the dining room at Aunt Lily's and Uncle Dick's home. Grandfather lived with Aunt Lily and Uncle Dick. Grandfather was always a very distinguished-looking man. I remember him as always being dressed in a white shirt and tie. When relaxed, he wore a smoking jacket, white shirt and tie, and sat in a great big mohair rocker in front of a card table and played solitaire by the hour. Uncle Dick with his back to the camera. I am at the end on the far side, next to Dad, and Mother is between Dad and Uncle Dick. On the near side, next to the camera, is Grandfather, then Uncle Harry, then Uncle Clay, and Aunt Lily on the opposite end. Uncle Harry was married to Aunt Eunice. She died in February of 1948. Uncle Harry was an engineer for the B&O and ran a switch engine in the railroad yard. Uncle Clay was married to Aunt Marguerite and lived in Cincinnati. Uncle Clay was an engineer on the B&O Railroad between Washington and Cincinnati, and lived with us when he was at our end of the run. Uncle Dick also worked for the B&O as a machinist. I think he operated a lathe. Uncle Dick must have been a saint. Grandfather would not have been an easy man to live with. Uncle Dick was not good enough to marry his little girl, and he was a Catholic, and he drank beer. Aunt Letha is grandfather's only child that's missing from the party. She was married to James Barrow and lived in Washington, D.C. Grandfather had flown to Washington, D.C. to see his daughter, Aunt Letha, and Uncle Jim in 1947. I turned 12 in July of 1948. If I flew before my birthday, I could fly for half price. Mother and Dad decided I could not pass up such a bargain, so I got to repeat his trip in May or June of 1948. What a summer. I flew by myself on this Eastern Airline DC-3, stayed with Aunt Letha and Uncle Jim in their apartment on Pennsylvania Avenue. During the day, I toured Washington, D.C. on a streetcar by myself, going to Aunt Letha's office in late afternoon and then back to their apartment for the night. In the evening, we would sit down and plan the next day's activities. After about 2 weeks, they put me on a train to Cincinnati, where I stayed overnight with Uncle Clay and Aunt Marguerite before a second train trip to Indianapolis. Mother and Dad met me, and we went to Michigan to get a 19-foot travel trailer. The rest of the summer was spent packing the trailer, going to Chicago Furniture Mart, and touring the West all the way to the Pacific Ocean. My memory is that I left school a day or two early and returned after school had started in the fall. What a summer. I had my first encounter with a finger bowl during the train trip to Cincinnati. More about that later. This section of the film is labeled Audubon. I do not recognize the place and have no idea where these pictures are taken. Grandfather always loved roses. Kaufman's was a big department store in Indianapolis. These are the Kansas coffins. This film was taken at Charles Coffin's farm near Leavenworth, Kansas. His wife Amy on the left, his daughter Shirley in the red checkered dress on the right. Mother is the woman in the blue and white striped dress with her back to the camera. Charles and Amy's boys, Lyle and Keith. I have a feeling that these were taken in the late summer of 1948 as we returned from our western trip. This is Charles's sister, Drusy. Charles and Drusy's father, William Coffin, is my grandmother, Melissa Coffin Krager's brother. Back to my train trip from Washington, D.C. to Cincinnati. Traveling by train was very elegant in those days. All the servants on board the train were black, or Negro as we would have said. The dining car was very, very elegant. Linen tablecloths and lots of heavy silver and thin crystal glassware. I was a 12-year-old kid from a small town in the hills of southern Indiana. I went to the dining car for dinner. A Negro waiter with a white napkin over his arm greeted me and showed me to my own table. I ordered, he brought my food, I ate. All went well until the very end. My waiter took away my dirty dishes and brought this small silver bowl with a clear liquid and a slice of lemon in it. I took one look and thought, what in the world am I to do with this? Whatever it was, it didn't look very appetizing. Charles Krager and Bob Heron borrowed an airplane from their friend. During a landing back at the farm, they caught a power line in the landing gear and crashed. They walked away, but the plane didn't survive so well. Aunt Lily's backyard with her son Richard, his wife Clara, and their brand new daughter Alice. These pictures must have been taken a few years earlier, probably during the war in about 1944. Here we have 4 generations. Back to my story. I had not noticed anyone else receiving this silver bowl or what they did with it. I would never have asked or admitted to a black servant that I did not know what to do with his offering. The wheels of my head were spinning, trying to figure out what to do. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought I had once heard of a finger bowl. I had never seen one, but this looked like what I imagined one might look like. I said, well, here goes. I stuck my fingers into the bowl, all the time watching the waiter out of the corner of my eye to see if he was shocked. He did not fall over with laughter. You can't believe how relieved I was. The whole family at the train station to say hello to Cousin Peggy as she passed through town. Peggy was David Krager's wife and Uncle Clay's daughter-in-law. This sort of quick reunion was quite common, since all the B&O trains between Cincinnati and St. Louis stopped in Washington to change crews. You can see our 1946 Ford in the street. Therefore, this would have had to have been sometime between 1946 and 1950. Here we are all coming up the front walkway of Uncle Dick and Aunt Lily's house. Alice has grown since the first pictures. Clara trying to get a coat on Alice. This must have been taken before Richard and Clara's son, Steve, was born. Aunt Lily, Uncle Dick, Mother, and myself. Aunt Lily and Uncle Dick. I want to go back to my trip to Washington, D.C. Looking back, it is hard for me to believe how times have changed. I can't imagine allowing a 12-year-old to tour Washington, D.C. by himself today. I did not fear being out by myself, and don't think my parents or Aunt Letha did either. Aunt Letha and Uncle Jim would sit down with me and tell me which streetcars to catch and what to see, but I don't remember ever being warned about people or places that I should not go. Remember, this was 1948. Truman was president. President Truman got out every morning for his constitutional walk on the streets around the White House. Aunt Letha and Uncle Jim lived just a few blocks down Pennsylvania Avenue from the White House. If it was safe for the president to walk the streets, it must be safe for a 12-year-old boy. This is at Aunt Grace's house in Westfield, Indiana. Aunt Grace is grandfather's sister. This is about the only time I remember meeting Aunt Grace. I think the young man with the yo-yo is my brother Charles. There are 2 people besides Charles that I'm not sure who they are. Aunt Grace had a daughter named Ruth that married Walter Leonard. They lived in Appleton, Wisconsin. It is possible that that's who these are. Aunt Lily and Aunt Grace having a bit of a dispute about how to wear her hat. Besides these people that I'm not sure about, we have grandfather, Aunt Lily, mother, dad, and myself. Mother showing off her pretty purple dress. Still in Westfield. Aunt Lily trying to talk to Aunt Grace. In our 7th Street backyard, Charles with Janie, one of Charles's many girlfriends. B. Colbert, another one of Charles's girlfriends, and Dorothy. Mother and Dorothy. Dorothy, get that tongue back in your mouth. Out on Uncle Harry's farm. I'm not sure who the little girl is. It's probably his granddaughter, Susie. Mother and Dad. Here I come from behind the camera. I think this is Cynthia and her dad, Clayton Krager, trying to hide behind the flower. Come on out. Uncle Harry's Jeep out in front of our 7th Street house. Uncle Harry sure was proud of that Jeep. It's a wonder any of us survived going up and down the hills on his farm. This must be Ruth, Clayton's wife, and their daughter Cynthia. Uncle Harry and Clayton with their heads under the hood. The end.